Start streaming. Okay. I think I've got this all set up. I hope. So let me get the link here. We'll go here. There. And post that. Okay, anybody who is watching at the moment, if there is anybody, welcome. Hopefully you can see everything all right. I'll go back to chat periodically if anybody comes in. Mostly what I just want to talk about this session, so to speak. I just want to talk about the Big Ten matchups that are going on this weekend. There's some pretty interesting ones. And I just don't really feel like editing or any of that fun stuff or uploading or rendering or, any of the fun stuff that you have to do when you actually do pre-recorded videos. So I figure stream will just be a little simpler. More raw, so to speak, right? We all like raw. Anyway, without further ado, my name is Chris, and this is Big Ten Football Talk. And this is week 6, and our first game I want to talk about I think it's an interesting one. And I'm sure both fan bases are at least intrigued because this is a game of two teams that really need to win this game. I mean, they're both 2 and 3, and that's of course Nebraska and Illinois being played tomorrow night at 8 on Fox Sports 1. And it is Nebraska going to Champaign. And I think, and I'm not going to go into delve too deep into any of these matchups individually. I'm just going to give you my gut on most of these. And my gut tells me Nebraska's got a bit more talent. I don't know if either one is better coached than the other at this point, just what we've seen from both teams early in the season. Is Illinois scrappy? Yeah. But I haven't really seen much that really impresses me from them. Nebraska's shown some toughness, some fight, but they played a really hard schedule. I mean, 3 losses, but they lost to Colorado, Michigan, and Minnesota. Now, Minnesota, they should have won that game. We all saw. Most of us that saw that game could say Nebraska had plenty of chances to win this, kept turning the ball over and shot themselves in the foot towards the end. Nebraska should be 3-2 right now by all rights, in my opinion. Illinois had a tough one as well. Played Kansas early in the year. That was a tough game. And I think they played them in Lawrence, so that was kind of difficult. But, again, this is going to be an interesting game, and I will take Nebraska. I'm not a gambler, but if I had to gamble, I would not, at the very least, not take Illinois to cover. And I think it'll be under 42.5 points because I just don't think either offense is really geared to score a whole lot of points. Nebraska's got an okay defense. Illinois usually has an okay defense, but I know they lost their defensive coordinator recently, so I'd say Nebraska will win. I'd say it may not be the prettiest of games. Probably be some turnovers on both sides, sloppy offense, okay defense. I think Nebraska will do just enough to win late in the fourth quarter. Next one. My Ohio State Buckeyes are at home to face the undefeated, and I kind of assumed they'd be ranked, Maryland Terrapins. This game is very, what do we want to say, crispy, we'll say. Interesting, at least, very least, I'll just say it's interesting. I don't really know if crispy is the right word here. But an interesting matchup because Maryland usually plays Ohio State tough, and this year Ohio State has looked a bit vulnerable in spots. I mean, we all saw the Indiana game. It wasn't pretty because Ohio State pulled away, but I think Ohio State just has more fuel in the tank than Indiana did. Indiana just didn't have the firepower or the personnel to keep up with Ohio State, and Ohio State outgassed them. They're a more talented team, and I think talent here ultimately will probably prove victorious for Ohio State, but I think Maryland's going to keep it close. They might even have a lead going into halftime. I think like a lot of games Ohio State's played already, they'll pull away in the second half and still beat the Terps. especially being in Columbus. But I think the way Tally has been playing this year, would it shock me to see Maryland win? No. But I'm going to give Ohio State the nod here. I'd say be a push kind of as far as the points go. I would almost bet over because both offenses are pretty good. And neither defense is really great. I mean, I haven't really seen. I don't know. I mean, what Ohio State gave up. Let's see here. How much did they give up to Indiana? I mean, you gave up. Well, okay, yeah, their defense is actually solid. That's right. I'm sorry. Their offense was the one that was struggling early in the year. That's right. I remember thinking, boy, they only scored 23 points to Indiana. Of course, they followed it up with a pretty solid victory over Youngstown State. I would have liked to have seen the shutout because that's an FCS opponent. Instead or not, I would have liked to have seen a shutout there. Western Kentucky, very impressive win, I thought. Hilltoppers are an okay team. Not as good as they were about 5-6 years ago, but an okay team. And Notre Dame, I don't even know if that was Ohio State beating Notre Dame, if they just took advantage of really bad mistakes by Notre Dame. I mean, Notre Dame really should have won that game, but they just, well, it's just like Ohio State last year at Georgia. I mean, you had them on the ropes, you had a big lead, and you let them stay in it. You let them start scoring some points. You start turning the ball over. You start going 3 and out. These teams are creeping back, and all of a sudden, boom, you're down. And it's late in the game. You just can't figure out how to come back. That's kind of what happened with Notre Dame, except just, I mean, you had 10 people on the field for Notre Dame at the end of the game. I mean, really? I won't dwell too much on that. Whatever. But this Maryland game, I'm just going, I won't keep talking about it, I guess. I am going to give Ohio State the nod. I'd say it'll be a relatively high-scoring game. I'm going to give Ohio State the nod. About, I'm going to say 38-28 Ohio State. I don't think they'll cover the spread, but I do think they'll win by 10. Late. I think they'll score a touchdown late, and they'll get a field goal to close the game. I think Ohio State will force some turnovers. It's a pretty opportunistic defense. Not the best secondary we've had ever, but pretty good. So I could see Ohio State beating Maryland as far as that goes. And we got another one, Rutgers and Wisconsin. Rutgers is a team to me that's really surprised me. I mean, since the game in the Big Ten, they've really lacked drive. They've lacked a pulse. They've pretty much been dead, for lack of better words, for the better part of 9 years they've been in the Big Ten. This year they've actually shown some pulse. I kind of like this team. But do they have the talent to back up the scrappy fight? Not really. They kind of remind me of Northwestern and those, pretty good years under Pat Fitzgerald where they go 8-4, 9-3, 10-2 here and there. Got to the Big Ten championship a couple of years, or maybe 1 year, but a scrappy bunch. Will play you tough, won't commit penalties much, won't turn the ball over much, but aren't really going to beat you when you're not really making mistakes. I could see Rutgers being that kind of a team. Probably don't make a whole lot of mistakes. I don't think they turn the ball over a whole lot. But are they strong enough to really beat Wisconsin straight up? I don't think so. Could I see Rutgers pulling up an upset? Maybe. But it's in Camp Randall. Those of us that know anything about Big Ten football, Wisconsin's incredibly hard to play in Camp Randall. It's Rutgers. Well, let's see who Rutgers has played. Let's look at that. They beat Northwestern. It was Northwestern's first game of the year. We all know what kind of offseason they had. I won't dwell too much at all really in that. It's a topic for another day that I may not ever talk about, but either way, Northwestern had a really bad offseason. We can all rely on that, or agree on that. So Rutgers beat them. Okay. I thought, okay, fine. They beat a hapless, probably not going to win many games Northwestern team. Okay. Of course, I was wrong, I think. They're 2-3, but anyway. Okay, and they played Temple. Well, okay, it's Temple. Matt Rule's not there anymore. They're not the Owls that they were, what was it, 7, 8 years ago when they almost beat, I think it was Clemson. Or they might beat Clemson that year. I can't remember now. But I know they beat a pretty, I know they had, what, I think a 10-2 season that year. Anyway. But then Rutgers beat Virginia Tech. Boom, they went into the Big Ten season 3-0. And then, of course, they went to the Big House where, okay, they got their first loss. No shock at all. 31-7. Decent that they held Michigan only 31 points, honestly. Then they flattened Wagner. I go, beat FCS team, but, I mean, Rutgers scored 52 points. I mean, I didn't see that at all happening. So, kudos on Rutgers. It's hard for me to really believe that Rutgers can go into Camp Randall and do something that Ohio State even struggles to do off and on throughout the last 10, 15 years. Is actually win in Camp Randall. That is a hard stadium to play in. It just is. I mean, Wisconsin had kind of a rough schedule earlier on. I mean, Georgia Southern's not, I don't think they're horrible. Let me look and see what their record is. I can't remember. I know they were decent. Yeah, I mean, they played a pretty tough Sun Belt team in Georgia Southern, 4-1 right now. They played them good, 35-14. Beat Purdue in East Lafayette, 38-17, or West, I can't remember which. I'm sorry, Purdue fans, if I got the name of your city wrong. Beat Buffalo in the opening week. Not really that impressive. They gave up 17 points to Buffalo, who don't know if they won a game yet this year. Yeah, okay, they won one game to Akron. Okay, so, yeah. Looking at the context behind Wisconsin's 3-1 record, not really impressive, but that Georgia Southern win I thought was good. They went on the road, beat Purdue, road conference game. That's not easy to do. So, yeah, it's Wisconsin, the juggernaut they were, where they run it down your throat. You can't stop them. They're going to, time of possession battle, they're always going to win that. Their quarterback just does enough to not lose the game. I don't really see that kind of a Wisconsin team this year. Kind of a boring team, honestly, what I've seen of them so far this year. Offensively, I mean. Not to knock Wisconsin, it's just you can win with having a boring offense. As long as it's not bad, as long as it's not turning the ball over, you can win. You can win like that. Look at the Jim Tressel teams back in the early 2000s. They were boring offensively, but they won. They controlled the line of scrimmage. They held on to the ball. Didn't turn the ball over much. Didn't commit penalties much. Won field position battle. I mean, when you do those things, you can win. It's not flashy. It's not sexy. You're not going to wow anybody with gaudy stats, but you still win. That's kind of how Minnesota does it. That's kind of how Iowa did do it. That's how Northwestern did it under Pat Fitzgerald. You can win like that. Now are you going to beat the huge juggernauts like the Ohio States and Michigans like that? Probably not. I mean, they just, with that kind of a large talent difference, if you catch them napping, get some turnovers, they commit a few too many penalties, which they tend to do, you can, but anyway, back to my point. You can win with having a boring offense, is all I'm saying. You can still win that way if you're well-disciplined and you don't make many mistakes. You don't beat yourselves, I guess I should say. Anybody commenting? They are not. Nobody's watching, but that's okay. We're okay with that. Let's move on here. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. And so, well, I'm glad the audio is working. At least if somebody goes back and watches it, they can hear what I'm saying anyway. Go back. All right, so I'm definitely going to take Wisconsin in this one because it's in Camp Randall, and I just can't put stock in Rutgers beating a heavyweight of the Big Ten even though Wisconsin is not as scary as they used to be. Still Wisconsin. It's still Camp Randall. I know it's a day game. They're not as strong on day games, but I don't know. I'm giving Wisconsin the nod here, but I don't think they'll cover the spread, and I don't think it's going to be over 43.5 points. I think I would say under if I was a gambler, which I'm not. Don't take my advice for that, but I would say under, and I could see Wisconsin winning this 20-10. I think it'll be a relatively low scoring affair, and I still think Wisconsin will probably win by 10, but I don't think they'll win by 13 or more. So I would not pick Wisconsin to cover the spread if it was my money. And we're looking at Northwestern Howard. I'm just going to take Northwestern because Howard's 2-2. They're an FCS opponent. They're in Northwestern. Northwestern's actually been playing with more heart than I thought they would this year because of their coach with what happened there in the off season. But they're playing with a lot of heart, a lot of toughness. I don't see Northwestern having much of a problem against Howard in Evanston. I just don't see that happening. I'm just going to move on there. We got Purdue at Iowa. 3:30 on Peacock. This is a tough one for me. I mean, I know Iowa's 4-1. I know Purdue's 2-3. Purdue's had a tough. I think they've just had a harder schedule. Let's look at who they played, shall we? They start out the year against Fresno State. Played them tough. Fresno is not an easy out. They never really have been. They've always been a pretty tough one to play for these Big Ten teams. I know I think they beat Wisconsin years ago. So they're one of the better Mountain West teams, and I think if the Pac-12 remains, I would take Fresno State ball as the Pac-12. But I might touch on that here later on the stream. But anyway, who'd Purdue play? They started the year at home against Fresno State. Tough games, tough game, tough team. Played well, but just couldn't do enough to win the game on defense. I mean, in my mind, if you score 35 on offense, you should win those games 7, 8, 9 out of 10 times. You shouldn't have to worry about your defense giving up more than 35 points a game, honestly, if you're a Big Ten team at all. I don't think you should worry about your defense giving up that many points. If you already scored 35, you should be able to win that game 9 times out of 10. But they didn't. Lost 39-35. Went to Blacksburg in week 2. Not an easy place to play, even though Virginia Tech's not nearly as scary as they used to be in Blacksburg. But a good road win in a non-conference opponent. Pretty good. And lost to the Dino Fabers of Syracuse, 35-20 at home. But Syracuse, again, it's a very good ACC opponent. Not great, but very good, I would say. Pretty good defense. Their offense is okay. But anyway, all I'm saying is Purdue has had a tough schedule so far. Then that was a tough one against Wisconsin, like we just talked about. Even though it was at home, they still lost 38-17. But then did beat Illinois then last weekend, 44-19. A very impressive victory. Scored quite a few points for a Purdue team that doesn't really score a whole lot of points, honestly. When I think of Purdue, I don't think of, they're going to probably score, 50 points in this game. I just, never see that out of Purdue, but a good victory against a conference opponent that just, you never know what you're going to get with Illinois. They really are like a box of chocolates, honestly. But then they are playing in Iowa City. Purdue, I mean. Ask Ohio State, 5 years ago. How much fun is it to play in Iowa City? It's not very much fun. Just not. I mean, it's just the way, that atmosphere, and especially, after the end of the first quarter, where they look up and everybody waves at those kids in the children's hospital. It's always a heartfelt moment. Shoot, the first time I saw that, I actually cried a little bit because that was just a really nice sentiment. I didn't know Iowa did that until that game, but it's just stuff like that. It's just not easy to beat Iowa in Iowa City. But let's look and see who Iowa's played, because I really can't remember, to be honest with you. Iowa, not really a tough non-conference really at all, I don't think. I mean, yeah, they beat the Aggies of Utah State 24-14. They beat their in-state rival, the Cyclones, which is usually a hard game. I mean, you got to kind of throw stats out the window when you're playing a rivalry like the Iowa-Iowa State games always are. There's usually always classic games. I've watched quite a few of them. They're usually very entertaining. Usually a tough, hard-fought victory for whoever wins. The Cyhawk Trophy, I think, is what they play for. Then crushed Western Michigan, but I think they're a very hapless MAC school. I'd think they've won a game, maybe. Let's look at that. I mean, it's not the Broncos like they were when PJ Fleck coached there. I'll just say that. Okay, they beat St. Francis, Pennsylvania, and Ball State. Western Michigan is just not at all an impressive team, and Iowa still give up 10 points to Western Michigan. So, yeah, they haven't had a tough schedule, and they got flattened by Penn State, a shutout, 31-0. Another playing in Happy Valley. I don't know. They could have been playing them on the moon. That's just not a good loss. Anytime you get shut out, unless you're only giving up 10 or less points on defense, it's a pretty bad loss. I mean, that's your conference opponent. But yeah, I mean, Iowa they're you can't give them much points for scoring points because they don't do that very well. Did beat a hapless Michigan State team last week, 26-16. And I'm sorry, Spartan fans. Don't mean to call your team hapless, but look at the play on the field. It really is sad to see that because I actually like to hate Michigan State because I'm an Ohio State fan. So, you got to hate the Michigan schools. But Sparty is just not the team they usually are, and it's not really an impressive victory in my mind for Iowa. So I don't know. I could almost see Purdue actually pulling this one off if it wasn't in Iowa City. You know what? I guess I should probably pick an upset for one of these games. Let me go back to the main screen here. And I'm sure somebody's going to upset somebody this weekend. I'm going to say, well, you know what? Purdue is pretty good at killing Giants. I'm going to say Purdue wins this game. And I think it's going to be a pretty ugly game anyway. I would definitely bet the under. They may not even score 20 points between them. I could see Purdue winning this game 13-3. In fact, that's the pick I'm giving is Purdue over Iowa in Iowa City 13-3. And if I am horribly wrong, you can let me know next week. But that is what I'm picking. And then last one, the nightcap on NBC/Peacock is Michigan going to Minneapolis to play the Golden Gophers of Minnesota. Michigan has looked pretty much perfect. Well, I know they haven't played many teams with the pulse, so you don't need to say, oh, well, they haven't played anybody. Yeah, I know they haven't. I would argue they shouldn't be number 2 because of just the strength of schedule so far, but they've dominated everybody they played. Has Georgia been dominant? Do they deserve to be number 1? I don't think so. I'll just say it. But they are number 2. And I can't really say who should be number 2. I mean, maybe it should be Ohio State because of the victory against Notre Dame. Maybe it should be Florida State after that shellacking they gave to LSU on opening night. I don't know who the second best team is in the nation. I don't know who the best team is because I don't think it's Georgia. I don't know who it is. But anyway, that's a different topic. This is who Michigan's played so far. I'm not impressed, really, as far as the non-conference goes. And it started out the year against ECU. Not a bad, not a horrible team. UNLV, the Rebs just aren't. I don't remember UNLV being real relevant in many years. I'll just say that. In football. Basketball, they're okay, but football, Bowling Green. Bowling Green did win last weekend. Who did they beat? Well, either way, Bowling Green's not a. It's an impressive victory. It's still a MAC school, but it's an impressive victory. 31-6. Rutgers, I did think that was a good victory because Rutgers is. Just don't think it's going to be an easy out this year for a lot of teams. I think they're going to get some eye-raising wins, I'll say, in Big Ten this year. Then went to Lincoln and thoroughly flattened the Huskers that really. Well, we've seen Nebraska. We've seen the offseason. It's a hot mess, and we all know it. I don't need to continue any further with that. So, yes, Michigan played anybody real scary? Not really. And back to my opinion, arguably the best team they played has been Rutgers, which they did beat. And they beat I think, pretty handsomely. It's at Minneapolis at night. Minnesota plays. They just a kind of a different team at night. I mean, they gave Ohio State everything they could ask for 2 or 3 years ago, I think, when it was that Ibrahim fella running all over the place. Ohio State still won, but Minnesota can be scary in Minneapolis, especially on night games. Now, can I say with, a, a sane mind, so to speak, or a sound mind, if that is such a thing nowadays, can I say right now that I believe Michigan's going to go into Minnesota and lose? No. But I do think it's going to be a closer game than Michigan's had to deal with this year. They may even find themselves in a deficit early in the game. You never know. Minnesota could get the ball first, march down the field, and score and shock Michigan. May not score again in the rest of the game, but Michigan could find themselves in a deficit this week. We don't know. I mean, Minnesota has been battle tested here and there, and I do like the teams that are battle tested, that really test themselves and play tough opponents in the non-conference. I mean, Minnesota, and they started the season off with a tough conference opponent with Nebraska. No one knew how good Nebraska was. No one knew how good Minnesota was. I thought it was a great game, honestly. I just thought it sucked that Nebraska turned the ball over so much in that game, but it was very entertaining. And I like defense anyways. So I'm biased anyhow. And then, of course, they beat Eastern Michigan, which is a pretty good MAC school, honestly. In recent years, they've actually been a pretty solid MAC school. Not the hapless Eagles that they were back in the early 2000s and 90s. And then Minnesota went to Chapel Hill and played a pretty tough North Carolina team, but they lost pretty bad. The biggest red mark I would give to Minnesota, and again, another reason why I just can't see them beating Michigan for other reasons too. Yeah, I know you went to Northwestern. I know it's not an easy place to play. You got to win that kind of a game. But the Louisiana victory was a good way to rebound after a tough loss in Evanston. So I'll give Minnesota that. But do I see Minnesota beating Michigan? Absolutely not. What's the money line? What's the spread on this one? Over under 46. If it was my money, I'd probably bet on the over, honestly. I could see this game going over 46 points just because Michigan can score at will when they need to. And I could see them needing to score a little bit to beat this team, but not a whole lot. Do I think Michigan will win by 19? Possible. But I could see it being a little bit less. I don't think I would bet Michigan to cover the spread in this particular game. I mean, I'll give Michigan the nod, and I'd say they'll win. Let's see here. Let's give a good score here. How about? Well, yeah, I could see them covering the spread barely. I could see it being a 38-17 victory for Michigan on the road at night. I think they'll have some issues early on. I think they'll get it straightened out, and I think they're going to dominate in the second half like they have so far this year. So those are my picks for the week for the Big Ten teams. And I'd like to talk a little bit just about how college football's been looking so far this year for me. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Pac-12 situation. In my mind, if the Pac-12 sticks around, I don't know if they will or not. They might dissolve. Who knows? I really do like the thought of the Mountain West and the Pac-12 merging into one. There's some very good Mountain West teams out there that would, I think, complement Oregon State and Washington State if they even stay in the Pac-12. If it exists next year, I know it's a lot of questions. I'm just going to give hypotheticals here. We'll assume Pac-12 is going to stay a conference for next year. Okay, let's just assume that. And let's assume that Oregon State and Washington State stays in that conference. Okay. I think Fresno State would be a solid team for it. San Diego State would be a solid team for it, both in the state of California, which I think would make sense geographically. Wouldn't be a crazy amount of travel to get to each game if those two are in it. Boise State, I like them, but I don't like them last couple years. They've been kind of flat, just kind of there. So they're not the Boise State Broncos they were under Chris Pearson, that's for sure. But that would be an interesting team, I think, in the Pac-12. Who else in the Mountain West? Hawaii, the travel, the fact that they're just not consistently real relevant. Not to knock your team, Hawaii, but I just don't see Hawaii being a real contributing member of a new Pac-12 conference. I just don't see it happening. Let's look at the Mountain West. Let me look at Mountain West, because I can't remember all the teams of that conference anymore. It's been too long since I really looked at them. Here we go. Okay. Like I said, San Diego State makes sense, even though they're struggling this year in the state of California. Fresno State, absolutely a slam dunk. Oh, shoot. UNLV's 4-1. Maybe that was a better victory than I thought for, I think it was Michigan. But anyway, Wyoming, that's a tough team. Again, I think Wyoming would be a good addition to the Pac-12. They're usually pretty tough, consistently a tough out. The last few years, shoot, they had Texas on the ropes there for a while. What, 2 weeks ago? Air Force, I mean, they're undefeated this year. I just don't know if they're consistent enough to really be part of a real juggernaut conference like the Pac-12. The service academies, I think they're the most consistent as far as consistently decent. Maybe not great, but consistent. I think Air Force is probably the best as far as that goes. San Jose State has had some good years, but this isn't one of them. Same with the Wolfpack of Nevada. I mean, I guess I can't really see Mountain West, the whole conference being merged with Pac-12 be a real great thing, but some of these teams would be good additions, I think. Like Fresno State, like Wyoming, Boise State, San Diego State, even though they're not that good this year, they usually are tough. And then maybe you could go and look at, say, the Conference USA teams. There could be some teams in there that could be decent additions to the new Pac-12, geography-wise, in my opinion. But I don't think Conference USA would be it. Let's look at some other ones here. I could see Rice being an okay addition, since you got all the teams from Texas and all that seems to, well, not all the teams in Texas, but Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC. I mean, Rice could be a viable option for the Pac-12, maybe. Let's see here. Who else here? I'd like to see the Ponies go to a Power 5 conference. I can't remember if they're going to the Big 12 or not. I think that would be awesome to see them go to a Power 5 conference again. Shoot, I wouldn't mind seeing the old Southwest Conference come back. I mean, those were awesome games. You had the SMU, Arkansas, Texas, Oklahoma. Who else was that? Texas Tech, I think, Baylor. I mean, that was a good conference. Those were classic games to watch back in the day. But anyway, I'm reminiscing. I'm going off on a tangent. I guess I should probably end it there. I've kind of ran out of things to talk about. I know I said just talking B1G week 6 matchups, and I did that. And I do need to get to sleep anyway. I just wanted to get something out there, and thanks for watching. Those of you that go back and watch this stream not live anymore, please do comment. Let me know how I did, what you think of my takes. Do you like this format? Is it good? Do you want me to go back to what I did a few years ago, where I actually did the pre-recorded things, did my research, looked at the stats, looked at the rankings, had the pretty screen or slideshow with the football helmets of the opposing teams? Let me know if you want me to go back to that more this year, if you just like this style. I mean, I'll give you my take. I watched college football, really followed it pretty close for the better part of most of my life. I'm 36. I remember my first football game I would watch with Dad when I was 7, I think. So 29 years. That was when Ohio State played Notre Dame for the first time, and I don't know, it was like 46 years, I think it was, since 49 prior to that. They played them in regular season, so I've been following this stuff for a long time. I'm a student of the game. I love it. I really like analyzing it, really understanding how it works and all that. Anyway, I'm rambling. Please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you do like this video and like what I do here, I intend on live streaming more often because I do think it's just simpler and I don't care how stupid I look live. Anyway, thank you for watching, those of you that did, if any of you do. And hey, that's cool, the WODs. I didn't know anybody was watching. Awesome. At least it's good to see another 36-year-old on here, all that. I wish I would have seen you're on here more. I would have had tried to have a conversation, but I do need to get to bed, so please do go back and watch the whole video if you'd like. Subscribe if you want to, and have a good night.